What happens when a lie is more powerful than the truth? For Julian Croft, a titan of industry with the world at his feet, a single image on his phone was enough to shatter a dynasty. It was a grainy, black-and-white ultrasound, a promise of a future he craved, sent by his captivating mistress. This one image convinced him to abandon everything he'd built, including his devoted pregnant wife, Annalise. He threw away a life of shared dreams and genuine love for a digital deception, a calculated whisper of betrayal. This is the story of how a single lie ignited an inferno of heartbreak, revenge, and the desperate, brutal fight for truth in a world built on glittering falsehoods. Julian Croft didn't just own buildings, he owned skylines. From his penthouse office on the 80th floor of the Croft Tower in the heart of London, he could watch the city breathe a sprawling kingdom of glass and steel that bent to his will. His company, Croftwood Estates, had reshaped the architectural landscape, turning forgotten docks into luxury lofts and derelict warehouses into hubs of commerce. At 38, he possessed a potent combination of old money polish and a street fighter's ambition. His suits were Savile Row, his watch was a Patek Philippe, and his eyes held the cold, calculating glint of a man who had never lost a deal. But there was one venture Julian hadn't conquered: legacy. The imposing portrait of his father, Augustus Croft, hung in his office, a constant silent judgment. Augustus had built the foundations, but he had also produced an heir. Julian, for all his billions, had yet to secure the next generation of the Croft dynasty. His wife Annalise was the antithesis of his world. Where he was sharp edges and ruthless expansion, she was quiet grace and curated beauty. An art historian with a specialty in Renaissance portraiture, she moved through their cavernous penthouse like a figure from one of her beloved paintings. She had brought warmth to the cool marble and modern art, her presence a gentle melody against the harsh percussion of his life. They had met at a charity gala where she'd been giving a lecture, and he found himself captivated not by her beauty alone, but by the passion in her voice as she spoke of chiaroscuro and forgotten artists. He pursued her with the same single-minded intensity he applied to a corporate takeover, and for 5 years their marriage had been on the surface perfect. The one unspoken tension was a child. 2 miscarriages had left hairline fractures in their relationship, invisible to the outside world, but deeply felt within the walls of their home. Julian grew more distant, his desire for an heir curdling into an obsession. Annalise felt his disappointment like a physical weight, a silent accusation in every shared meal. Then 6 months ago, a miracle. Annalise was pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was holding strong. A fragile joy began to mend the cracks between them. Julian, for the first time in years, seemed to soften. He would come home from work and place a hand on her burgeoning stomach, a flicker of genuine wonder in his eyes. He stopped talking about legacy and started talking about names. They were having a boy. Annalise had never been happier. The chill was receding from their gilded cage. The first sign of the coming storm was a name: Sienna Vance. She was a junior acquisitions analyst at a rival firm, a sharp, ambitious woman in her late 20s with eyes that missed nothing. Julian had met her during a hostile negotiation. He'd won the deal, but he'd been impressed by her tenacity. He saw a younger version of himself in her hunger. Their interactions had started as professional, then escalated to clandestine lunches, and finally to a discreetly rented apartment in Knightsbridge. To Julian, Sienna was an escape. She didn't want warmth or emotional connection. She wanted the thrill of his power. She mirrored his ambition, applauded his ruthlessness, and never made him feel guilty for the man he was. With her, he wasn't a husband failing to produce an heir. He was the king, undisputed and potent. Annalise knew something was amiss. The late nights at the office became more frequent. The scent of an unfamiliar perfume clung faintly to his coat, and the digital wall around his phone became impenetrable. She tried to dismiss it as stress, the pressure of his empire. Her pregnancy, now entering its 7th month, was her anchor. She focused on the nursery, on the tiny life fluttering inside her, and chose to believe in the man she had married. The lie arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. Annalise was in the nursery, humming softly as she folded a tiny cashmere blanket. The room was bathed in the soft, hopeful light of a London spring. Julian was in his office closing a 9-figure deal for a development in Canary Wharf. His phone buzzed on the polished mahogany desk. A message from Sienna. He opened it, a faint smile on his lips. But it wasn't one of her usual flirtatious texts. It was a picture, black and white, grainy, unmistakably an ultrasound. Below it, a single line of text I didn't know who else to tell. We need to talk. I'm 12 weeks along. Julian stared at the image. The tiny, curled form. The fluttering heartbeat he could almost imagine. 12 weeks. He did the math in his head. It was possible. It was terrifyingly possible. The deal he had just closed, the billions of pounds, the future of London's skyline, it all faded into meaningless noise. All he could see was that image. A potential heir. His heir. A second text came through. It's a boy, Julian. Venom. Pure, cold venom seeped into his veins. He looked at the portrait of his father. The stern eyes seemed to bore into him, not with judgment now, but with a kind of triumphant expectation. He had been trying for years with Annalise, enduring the heartbreak, the quiet accusations, the feeling of inadequacy. And here with Sienna, a woman of fire and ambition like himself, it had happened, effortlessly. A storm of emotion crashed through him. Guilt, yes, a fleeting, nauseating wave of it. But it was quickly drowned by a tidal wave of resentment. Resentment towards Annalise. It wasn't rational, it wasn't fair, but it was potent. He felt as if she had somehow failed him, that her body had betrayed their shared dream, while Sienna's had delivered it. He called his driver. Take me home. Now. Annalise heard the front door slam, the sound echoing unnaturally in their sprawling apartment. Julian never slammed doors. She walked out of the nursery, a smile on her face, ready to greet him. You're home early, she began, her hand resting on her stomach. The smile died on her lips when she saw his face. It was a mask of cold fury she hadn't seen since their earliest days together when he was destroying a business rival. Julian, what's wrong? He didn't answer. He walked past her, his movements stiff and angry, and went into their bedroom. She followed, a knot of dread tightening in her chest. He was pulling a suitcase from the top of the wardrobe, throwing it onto the bed. What are you doing? Are you going somewhere? She asked, her voice trembling. He finally turned to look at her, and his eyes were devoid of any warmth, any memory of the love they had shared. He held up his phone, the screen glowing with the black and white image. Explain this, he said, his voice lethally quiet. Annalise squinted at the screen. An ultrasound. For a moment, she was confused. It's an ultrasound, Julian. Like ours. What about it? It's not ours, Annalise. He spat her name like a curse. It's mine, and Sienna Vance's. She's 12 weeks pregnant, with my son. The world tilted on its axis. The air rushed from Annalise's lungs. Her hand which had been resting on her own baby bump, flew to her mouth. "What? No. That's impossible. It's a lie. Is it?" He sneered, his face contorted with a cruel triumph. "I find it remarkably believable. Perhaps some people are just more capable of fulfilling their promises." The insult, so pointed and so brutal, struck her with the force of a physical blow. She staggered back, tears welling in her eyes. "Julian, please, don't do this. We're having a baby. Our baby. You felt him kick just this morning." "Did I?" he said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "How can I be sure of anything anymore? How can I be sure that child is even mine?" That was it, the final unforgivable blow. Annalise felt something inside her shatter. The love, the hope, the patient faith she had held on to for so long, it all turned to dust. "Get out," she whispered, the words barely audible. "Oh, I'm leaving," he said, zipping the suitcase with a sound of finality. "But you're the one who will be getting out. This is my house, my name. You will be hearing from my lawyer. He will be generous, provided you are cooperative." He walked towards the door, not even glancing at her. She stood frozen, a statue of disbelief and agony. As his hand touched the doorknob, she found her voice no longer a whisper, but a cry of raw pain. "Julian, after everything, you would believe a picture on a phone over me, over our son." He paused, his back still to her. For a fraction of a second, she saw his shoulders tense, a flicker of something, doubt, regret, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "The picture," he said, his voice cold and hard as diamonds, "is the only thing that feels real to me right now." And with that, he walked out, leaving Annalise alone in the silent, opulent cage that had once been their home. The joyful light of the nursery now seeming to mock her from down the hall. The lie had won. The storm had arrived. The silence Julian left behind was a living entity. It pulsed in the vast, empty spaces of the penthouse, mocking Annalise with the ghosts of shared laughter and whispered promises. For 2 days, she moved through the rooms like a wraith, the shock so profound it numbed the pain. She'd touch the cool marble of the kitchen island where they'd planned their future, trace the outline of his indentation on the bed, and stand before the nursery door, unable to enter. The world had shrunk to the size of her betrayal. The 3rd day brought the lawyer's email. It was coldly efficient, outlining the terms of their separation. A generous settlement contingent on a swift, quiet divorce and her vacating the property within the week. Attached was a non-disclosure agreement that would gag her for life. The words swam before her tear-filled eyes, but one phrase burned itself into her mind: paternity of the child. Julian was formally contesting it, demanding a test upon the baby's birth. The results would determine the final child support settlement. The numbness finally shattered, replaced by a seismic wave of fury. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a calculated erasure. He was trying to strip her of her dignity, her home, her name, and even her connection to the child she carried. That fury was a fire, and it burned away the last vestiges of the heartbroken wife, forging something new and hard in its place. She picked up her phone and made the only call she could. "Chloe, can you come get me?" Chloe, Annalise's younger sister, arrived within the hour. She was a journalist, sharp-witted and fiercely protective, with an allergy to injustice and billionaire egos. She took one look at Annalise's pale face and the single packed suitcase by the door, and her expression hardened. "Tell me everything," Chloe said, her voice dangerously calm. As Annalise recounted the story, her voice breaking over the details of the ultrasound and Julian's cruel words, Chloe's calm morphed into incandescent rage. A picture. He blew up his marriage over a JPEG. Chloe paced the vast living room, her energy a stark contrast to its sterile opulence. Annalise, this stinks. It stinks to high heaven. This woman, Sienna, she sends a picture and he just capitulates. It's too easy. It's a setup. He believes her, Annalise whispered, the pain still raw. Because he wants to, Chloe retorted, stopping in front of her. Because this ambitious little viper is selling him a story he's desperate to buy. But we are not going to let them get away with it. Leaving the penthouse was one of the hardest things Annalise had ever done. She left behind the paintings, the designer clothes, the life of effortless luxury. She took only her personal effects, her research notes, and a small framed photo from their wedding day, a reminder not of what she'd lost, but of what she was now fighting against. As the elevator descended, she didn't look back. Chloe's apartment in Notting Hill was a world away. It was small, cluttered with books and press passes, and filled with the scent of brewing coffee and the chaotic energy of a life lived not just curated. It was real. For the first time in a week, Annalise felt like she could breathe. Meanwhile, Sienna Vance was ascending. She moved into the penthouse the day after Annalise left. She wandered through the rooms, her heels clicking on the marble floors, a triumphant smile on her face. She ran her hands over the silk sheets, opened the walk-in closet, filled with Annalise's ghost, and stood on the balcony looking down at the city. It was all hers. The power, the prestige, the man. Julian, consumed by his own narrative of betrayal and vindication, welcomed her. He convinced himself that Sienna's presence was a balm. She was proof that he had made the right choice. She was vibrant, exciting, and most importantly, she was supposedly carrying his son. "I can't believe how easily she just left," Sienna said, one evening wrapped in a silk robe that had once belonged to Annalise, a glass of sparkling water for the baby, she'd said, with a wink in her hand. No fight, no drama. She knew she was cornered, Julian said, his voice hard. He was trying to convince himself as much as her. The truth has a way of silencing people, but the performance of being the perfect pregnant mistress was more demanding than Sienna had anticipated. Julian, now obsessed with this new pregnancy, was hyper-attentive. He asked about her symptoms, her doctor's appointments, her cravings. "Did you feel sick this morning?" he'd ask. "Oh, terribly." She'd lie, trying to remember what she'd read on a pregnancy blog. Just couldn't keep anything down until noon. He hired a nutritionist for her who drew up a complex diet plan that Sienna, who subsisted on coffee and ambition, found revolting. He booked her an appointment with the most sought-after obstetrician in London, a Dr. Alistair Finch. "I'll come with you, of course," Julian had said. "I want to be there for the next scan." Panic flared in Sienna's chest, cold and sharp. "No," she said a little too quickly. She softened her voice. "I mean, it's still so early, darling. It makes me nervous having other people there. Let me get through the first trimester safely, for the baby's sake." Julian, though disappointed, relented. His desire to protect this precious new pregnancy overrode his suspicion. He was a man blinded by a lie he desperately wanted to be true. But the cracks in Sienna's story began to show, not to Julian, but to others. Marcus Thorne, Julian's longtime lawyer and closest friend, met Sienna at a dinner. He was a shrewd, observant man who had known Julian since their days at Oxford. He listened as Sienna recounted a story about her sudden craving for olives and ice cream. Later, he saw her discreetly push away a plate of smoked salmon, remarking how she'd suddenly developed an aversion to it. Marcus called Julian the next day. She's energetic, he said carefully. She's a firecracker, Julian boasted. Full of life. Indeed, Marcus said. It's just, I seem to recall Annalise having a terrible aversion to smoked salmon during her first pregnancy. And the second, something about the smell. Coincidence, Julian snapped, defensive. Perhaps, Marcus replied, unconvinced. Just be careful, Julian. This is a life-altering decision based on very little information. The comment gnawed at Julian, an uncomfortable splinter in the back of his mind. But then he would look at Sienna, so beautiful and seemingly fertile, and push the doubt away. In the small Notting Hill apartment, Annalise and Chloe were building a war room. Okay, first things first, Chloe said, drawing a mind map on a large whiteboard. We need to know everything about Sienna Vance, where she lives, who her friends are, her social media, her work history, everything. Annalise, using her skills as a historian, began to dig. She was a meticulous researcher trained to find the truth in faded documents and forgotten archives. She now applied that same rigor to the digital footprint of her husband's mistress. Chloe, using her journalistic contacts, started making discreet inquiries. The ultrasound, Chloe said, tapping the center of the whiteboard. That's the weapon. We need to dismantle it. Where did it come from? It looked so real, Annalise said, the memory still a fresh wound. It could be a stock photo. It could be from a friend. Or, Chloe's eyes narrowed. It could be fake. There are companies online that will generate a fake ultrasound with any name and date you want for £100. Annalise felt a jolt of electricity. Could it be that simple? The simplest cons are often the most effective, Chloe said. We need to see that picture again. We need to analyze it. But how Julian had shown it to her for only a moment. She hadn't thought to take a picture of it. He'll have it on his phone, Annalise realized. He'll be looking at it, cherishing it. The thought was sickening, but it also presented an opportunity. They needed access, a way to get a copy of that digital serpent. Their first concrete goal was set. While Sienna was busy playing the part of a glowing mother-to-be, ordering baby furniture for a non-existent baby, and practicing her pained morning sickness face in the mirror, Annalise was transforming. The grief was still there, a heavy cloak she carried, but now it was lined with purpose. She was no longer Julian Croft's discarded wife. She was a woman fighting for her child's birthright and her own truth. She was fighting for the memory of the love that had been so casually annihilated by a lie. The battle had just begun. The first crack in Julian's fortress of denial came not from a dramatic revelation, but from a quiet, mundane detail. He was working late, a habit he'd fallen back into the thrill of Sienna's company, already beginning to feel less like a victory and more like a performance. He scrolled through his phone, stopping, as he often did, at the ultrasound image. It was his anchor, the justification for the wreckage he had caused. He zoomed in something he hadn't done before. He was trying to imagine the baby, his son. His eyes scanned the technical data printed at the top of the image. The patient's name was there, clear as day, Vance Sienna. The date was correct. But then he saw the name of the clinic printed in small block letters, Connolly Fertility Clinic. Julian frowned. The name was unfamiliar. He had assumed Sienna had gone to one of the well-known private clinics in Chelsea or Marylebone. He'd certainly never heard of this one. A quick search revealed it was a smaller reputable clinic, but located in Blackheath, southeast London, an entirely different part of the city from where Sienna lived and worked. It wasn't impossible, of course, but it was odd. A logistical inconvenience for a woman who valued efficiency above all else. It was a small, dissonant note in the symphony of her otherwise perfect story. He filed it away, an unscratchable itch. In Notting Hill, Annalise and Chloe were hitting a wall. They needed the image, but Julian's digital security was ironclad. "There's no way in remotely," said Ravi, a tech-savvy friend of Chloe's from her journalism days. He was a digital forensics expert who owed Chloe a favor. "The man's phone has more firewalls than a government server. You need physical access, or you need him to send the image to someone." "He won't do that," Annalise said, disheartened. "He's guarding it like a state secret." "Then we have to go after the source," Chloe insisted, her gaze fixed on the whiteboard. "The ultrasound itself. If she faked it, she left a trail. People like Sienna, they're arrogant. They think they're smarter than everyone else, and that makes them sloppy." Their research into Sienna Vance had painted a picture of ruthless ambition. She came from a modest background, clawing her way into a world of privilege. She had a small circle of friends, a history of short-lived but advantageous relationships, and a meticulously curated social media presence that screamed new money. There were no obvious red flags, just a relentless upward trajectory. "Let's go back to the clinic," Annalise said, suddenly an idea forming. "Even if we can't see the image, he can, and he's a man of details. He will have noted the name of the clinic on the scan." "And how does that help us?" Chloe asked. "Because we don't have to prove the ultrasound is fake," Annalise explained, her voice gaining strength. "We just have to plant a seed of doubt in Julian's mind. We create a situation where he has to question it." The plan was audacious. It relied on a deep understanding of Julian's psychology, his arrogance, his need for control, and his secret fear of being made a fool. The first step was an anonymous tip. Chloe, using a burner phone and a voice modulator, called Marcus Thorne, Julian's lawyer. "I have information regarding Julian Croft and Sienna Vance," the distorted voice said. "Ask your client to look carefully at the ultrasound he is so proud of. Ask him if he's ever heard of the Connolly Fertility Clinic. Then ask him why Sienna would go all the way to Blackheath for a scan when she lives in Knightsbridge. People with secrets often use inconvenient locations." The line went dead. Marcus, intrigued and already suspicious, did exactly as the voice suggested. He called Julian. "Julian, a strange thing happened. I got an anonymous call about Sienna." "Tabloid vultures," Julian scoffed. "Ignore it." "This was different," Marcus pressed. "They mentioned the ultrasound. They told me to ask you about the clinic it came from." "The Connolly Fertility Clinic in Blackheath." There was a moment of silence on Julian's end. The unscratchable itch was now a raw, inflamed wound. "What's your point, Marcus?" "My point is, it's a valid question. Why would she go there? Did she tell you about this appointment beforehand, or did she just present you with the finished product?" "She wanted to be sure before she told me." Julian snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. The seed was planted. That evening, he confronted Sienna. He tried to be casual, but the question was loaded. "I was looking at the scan again, darling," he began, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "I noticed the clinic was the Connolly in Blackheath. That's quite a trek for you." Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained a mask of placid innocence. She had rehearsed this. She knew this question might come. "Oh, that," she said, with a dismissive wave of her hand. "My old flatmate from uni, she recommended it. Said they were wonderfully discreet. You know how I value privacy. I didn't want to risk being seen at one of the big places where we might know people. I wanted it to be our little secret until the time was right." The answer was plausible, smooth. It almost reassured him. But the seed of doubt, once planted, had taken root. He found himself watching her more closely. He noticed how she'd sometimes forget she was supposed to be tired, her energy levels unnaturally high. He saw her accept a glass of champagne at a gallery opening, holding it for half an hour without taking a sip, a piece of social camouflage. Meanwhile, Chloe and Annalise launched the second phase of their plan. Annalise, drawing on her art world connections, discovered that a prominent real estate blogger, someone Julian respected and read religiously, was an acquaintance of hers. Annalise met her for coffee, and under the guise of discussing her amicable separation, she subtly steered the conversation. "Julian is already moving on," Annalise said, feigning a sad resignation. "With a woman from a rival firm, I believe, Sienna Vance. She's pregnant, apparently. The whole thing has been swift." "Sienna Vance," the blogger said, her eyes widening with recognition. "Small world. I saw her just last week at a vinyasa yoga class, one of those intense, hot yoga sessions. I remember thinking it was brave of her. She was really pushing herself. I wouldn't have thought that was advisable for someone in the first trimester." Annalise's heart leaped. "Hot yoga. Are you sure?" "Positive. It was at the hot spot in Soho. I go every Thursday." This was it. The first major verifiable crack in Sienna's story. The kind of detail Julian, with his focus on health and physical discipline, would never overlook. The blogger, sensing a scoop, wrote a seemingly innocuous piece about the movers and shakers in the London property scene. Tucked into a paragraph about rising stars was a line, "Spotted last week, keeping her edge, was Sienna Vance of Sterling Thorne, pushing her limits at a grueling hot yoga session in Soho." In the cutthroat world of London real estate, it seems there are no days off. Julian read the blog every morning. When he saw the line, he felt a jolt, as if he'd touched a live wire. Hot yoga. He had explicitly told Sienna to avoid any strenuous activity. He'd hired the nutritionist, the prenatal specialist. He remembered her telling him she was feeling too nauseous and exhausted for anything more than a gentle walk. He stormed into the bedroom where Sienna was reading a magazine in bed. He threw his tablet onto the silk duvet. "Explain this." Sienna read the line, and for the first time, raw panic flashed in her eyes before she could conceal it. "That's ridiculous. I haven't been to a yoga class in months. That blogger must have mistaken me for someone else. She names you specifically Sienna. It's a mistake, a lie." "Maybe Annalise put her up to it," she cried, turning the accusation around. "She's trying to poison you against me, against our baby." Her defense was hysterical, emotional, and for a moment, it worked. Julian wanted to believe her. It was easier to believe in Annalise's malice than in Sienna's deception. But the roots of doubt were now too deep. The odd location of the clinic, the anonymous phone call, and now the yoga. Too many dissonant notes. His mind, trained to spot inconsistencies in complex deals, was finally beginning to turn its analytical power onto the story he had so readily accepted. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay beside Sienna, who feigned sleep, her breathing too, even too controlled. He rose and went to his office. He looked at the portrait of his father, not for validation this time, but with a growing sense of dread. The dread of a man who suspects he has been made the ultimate fool. He opened his laptop and did something he should have done weeks ago. He typed in the name of the man Sienna was supposed to be seeing, the esteemed Dr. Alistair Finch. He found the number for his private practice. Then he went back to the ultrasound. He looked at the Connolly Fertility Clinic. He found their number too. His finger hovered over the keypad. He was Julian Croft. He did not ask questions. He got answers. With a deep breath, he decided it was time to get some. The truth, whatever it was about to be hunted down. Julian's first call was to the office of Dr. Alistair Finch, the top obstetrician he had insisted Sienna see. He used his full name, a weapon in itself, and was put through to the practice manager almost immediately. "This is Julian Croft. I'm calling to confirm an appointment for my partner, Sienna Vance. I seem to have misplaced the date, and I want to ensure my schedule is clear." He made his voice sound casual, the busy billionaire checking his diary. The manager's polite typing filled the silence. After a moment, she returned. "I'm sorry, Mr. Croft, but I don't have a Sienna Vance registered as a patient with Dr. Finch. Are you sure of the name Vance, V-A-N-C-E? Julian spelled it out, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. "No, sir. Definitely no patient by that name. We have no record of her at all." The words landed like punches. Sienna had lied. She had never made the appointment. He thanked the manager, his voice a strained whisper, and hung up. The floor of his office suddenly felt 1,000 feet below. Why would she lie about something so easily verifiable? His heart hammering, he dialed the second number, the Connolly Fertility Clinic in Blackheath. This time, he was more direct. "My name is Julian Croft. I have reason to believe a fraudulent document may have originated from your clinic. I need you to verify a patient for me. Her name is Sienna Vance." The receptionist was wary. "Sir, we can't release patient information over the phone due to confidentiality laws." "I understand that," Julian said, his voice dropping, taking on the commanding tone that closed deals. "But I am not asking for her medical records. I am asking you to confirm if a woman named Sienna Vance was a patient at your clinic on or around the 10th of March this year. The integrity of your clinic's documentation is at stake. If you cannot help me, my next call will be to my lawyers to begin formal proceedings." The threat worked. The receptionist put him on hold. The wait was agonizing. Each tick of his Patek Philippe watch was a hammer blow to his sanity. Finally, a new voice came on the line. It was the clinic's director. "Mr. Croft, I've pulled our records for the past year. I can state unequivocally that we have never had a patient named Sienna Vance at this facility. The ultrasound you are describing did not originate from the Connolly Fertility Clinic." Julian felt a wave of vertigo. "But it has your name on it. Your letterhead. Then the document is a forgery, Mr. Croft, a complete fabrication." He hung up the phone, his hand trembling. It was all a lie. The clinic, the doctor, the pregnancy, a house of cards built on a single fraudulent image. The rage he felt was monumental, but it was dwarfed by a tidal wave of self-loathing. He had thrown Annalise out. He had accused her, disowned her, questioned the paternity of their child. For this, for a cheap, theatrical lie. He needed proof, irrefutable, damning proof that he could hold in his hand. He needed the source of the lie. He called Marcus. "I need a private investigator," Julian said, his voice raw. "The best. I don't care what it costs. I want to know everything about Sienna Vance. And I want that ultrasound image analyzed by a forensics expert. Now." While Julian's world was imploding, Chloe and Annalise were following their own thread, leading them down a much darker path. Ravi, their tech expert friend, had given them a new lead. "I can't get the image from Julian's phone," Ravi had said. "But there's another way. People who create fakes like this are either lazy or proud. Lazy means they grab a generic image from a stock photo site. Proud means they might have talked about it. I've been scanning social media, looking for mentions of Sienna Vance linked to anything about pregnancy or deception." He had found something. A post from over a year ago on the public Facebook page of a woman named Lucy Carmichael. It was a memorial post. The post was a photo of a smiling, pregnant woman, and the text read, "1 year ago Today, we lost our beautiful Lucy and her baby boy Leo. She was so excited to be a mum. We'll never forget her joy, and we're sharing her 12-week scan photo again, the one she was so proud of. We miss you every day. And there it was. Attached to the post was a grainy black and white ultrasound. Annalise's blood ran cold as she looked at it. It was identical. The shape of the fetus, the angle, the placement of the text fields. It was the same image. Chloe started digging into Lucy Carmichael. The details were heartbreaking. She had died from complications during childbirth. A scroll through her friend list revealed a familiar name, Sienna Vance. They had been colleagues at a previous job several years ago. "Oh my God," Annalise whispered, horrified. "She stole it. She stole a dead woman's ultrasound photo." The sheer ghoulish depravity of the act was staggering. This wasn't just a simple lie or a Photoshop job. This was a violation of a tragedy. Sienna had taken a symbol of a dead friend's greatest joy and twisted it into a tool for her own greedy ambition. "We have it, Annalise," Chloe said, her voice a mixture of disgust and triumph. "This is the nail in her coffin. This is absolute." They saved the image, the date of the post, the screenshot of Sienna's name on the friend list. They had the origin story of the lie. 3 days later, Julian sat in Marcus Thorne's sterile, soundproofed conference room. A thick, spiral-bound dossier lay on the table between them. It was the private investigator's report. "It's all in there," Marcus said grimly. "Bank statements, travel records, interviews with former colleagues." Julian opened it. The first page was a side-by-side comparison. On the left was the image from his phone. On the right was the screenshot from Lucy Carmichael's memorial page. They were identical. Below was the forensic analysis, the header text containing the name Vance Sienna, and the date has been digitally inserted. Tool marks are consistent with Adobe Photoshop. The base image is a direct copy of the one posted on social media. He felt a physical revulsion, a sickness that started in his gut and rose as bile in his throat. He flipped through the pages. The PI had discovered more. Sienna hadn't just stolen the image, she had been meticulously planning her deception for months. She had purchased books on pregnancy symptoms. Her credit card statements showed purchases for morning sickness remedies she never used, and a single one-time purchase from a maternity clothing website, all to create a believable illusion. The PI had even found the online service she'd used to have the ultrasound professionally altered for a fee of £150. The report detailed her financial precarity before meeting him, the mounting debts, the desperate ambition that colleagues described as predatory. She wasn't just an opportunist, she was a sociopath. The final page was the most damning. It was a transcript of a recorded conversation the investigator had managed to get with one of Sienna's disgruntled former friends. Sienna always said, "You have to use whatever assets you have." The friend was quoted. She once joked that the saddest stories make the best weapons. When Lucy died, she was sad for a day, but I remember her looking at the memorial posts and saying something weird, like, "People will believe anything if it's wrapped in enough emotion." It gives me chills thinking about it now. Julian closed the dossier. The silence in the room was absolute. He had been played not just by a simple con artist, but by a ghoul who preyed on tragedy. His entire world, which he thought he controlled with absolute authority, had been dismantled by a 150th forgery and a dead woman's memory. The disgust he felt for Sienna was a white-hot nova, but the shame he felt for himself was a black hole consuming everything. He saw Annalise's face in his mind. Her tears, her pleas, her hand on her pregnant stomach. He heard his own voice, cold and cruel, questioning their child. "Get me my car," he said to Marcus, his voice a low growl. "I'm going to the penthouse. It's time for the performance to end." He walked out of the law office and into the London rain, not as a king of the city, but as a fool about to face his executioner. And he knew, with chilling certainty, that his true judgment would not come from Sienna, but from the woman he had so brutally cast aside. The drive to the penthouse was a journey through a landscape of self-recrimination. Every traffic light, every rain-streaked window reflected Julian's failure. The dossier sat on the passenger seat beside him, a venomous, tangible weight. It wasn't just a report. It was the story of his own staggering foolishness, his monstrous cruelty. He didn't use his key. He had the doorman let him in, wanting the element of surprise. When he stepped out of the private elevator and into the apartment, he found Sienna in the living room on the phone with a high-end furniture store, laughing as she discussed options for the nursery. The nursery he had planned with Annalise. No, something much more modern," she was saying, her back to him. "Forget the traditional rocking horse. I'm thinking something minimalist, perhaps in chrome." "Hang up the phone, Sienna," Julian said. His voice was quiet, devoid of its usual power, but it carried a chilling finality that made her freeze. She turned slowly, a brilliant fake smile plastered on her face, which faltered when she saw his expression. It was a mask of dead, cold calm. "Julian, darling, you're home?" she said, her voice a little too bright. "I was just sorting out the final touches for the baby's room." "There is no baby," he stated. It wasn't a question. Sienna's practiced smile twitched. "What are you talking about? Don't be silly. I was feeling him kick just this morning." It was a pathetic last-ditch lie, and it made something inside Julian snap. He walked over to her and threw the dossier onto the glass coffee table. The heavy file landed with a loud, violent thud that echoed in the silent room. "Open it," he commanded. Her eyes darted from his face to the file and back again. The color drained from her cheeks. She knew. She didn't know how he knew, but she knew the game was over. Her hands trembled as she reached for the dossier, her carefully manicured fingers fumbling with the cover. She opened it to the first page, the side-by-side comparison of the ultrasounds. A choked, strangled sound escaped her lips. "Lucy Carmichael," Julian said, his voice dripping with contempt. "I believe she was a friend of yours. Or was she just research material? Tell me, Sienna, when you were looking at her memorial page, did you feel a flicker of anything? Or were you just shopping for the perfect lie?" Sienna slammed the folder shut, her composure shattering into 1,000 pieces. The mask of the sophisticated socialite fell away, revealing the desperate cornered creature beneath. "It's not what it looks like. That's a coincidence, a horrible, tragic coincidence." "Stop lying," he roared, the sound exploding from him raw and volcanic. "I spoke to the Connolly Clinic. I spoke to Dr. Finch's office. I know everything. The hot yoga, the fake diet, the 115 you paid to have a dead woman's memory desecrated for your own pathetic little scam." Her face crumpled. The lies were exhausted. She tried a new tactic, tears. Great theatrical sobs began to rack her body. "I did it for you, for us," she cried, reaching for him. "I love you, Julian. I knew how much you wanted a son, an heir. I just wanted to give you the happiness Annalise couldn't." Julian recoiled from her touch, as if she were a venomous snake. "You don't know the first thing about love." He spat, his disgust palpable. "You know about currency, about leverage. You saw my desperation, and you used it like a weapon. You saw a grieving family's tragedy, and you used it as a prop. You are the most vile, empty thing I have ever had the misfortune of knowing." The tears stopped as quickly as they had started when she saw that her emotional appeal had failed. Her expression hardened, twisting into a bitter, resentful sneer. "So what? It worked, didn't it? For a few months, you were happy. You looked at me with a light in your eyes you never had for her. I gave you what you wanted, even if it was just a story, and you believed it because you were weak. You were so desperate for an heir to please the ghost of your daddy that you were willing to believe anything. Don't you dare put this all on me." Her words were poison-tipped arrows, and they all hit their mark. He was weak. He had been a fool. And that more than anything was what he could not forgive. "Get your things," he said, his voice dropping back to that terrifying, low calm. "Anything you came here with, you have 10 minutes. "You can't just throw me out," she shrieked, panic returning. "I gave up everything for you." "You gave up nothing because you had nothing," he countered coldly. "You are a parasite, Sienna, and the host has just been cured. The clothes you're wearing, the jewelry, the life you've been living for the past 3 months, it's all over. You will walk out of here with what you brought in your suitcase and nothing more. If I ever see your face again, if you ever try to contact me or anyone I know, I will not just sue you into oblivion. I will personally fund a lawsuit on behalf of the Carmichael family for what you did to them. I will ruin you so completely you won't be able to get a job cleaning toilets. Am I clear?" The sheer, unadulterated menace in his voice left no room for argument. Sienna stared at him, her chest heaving, her mind racing for an angle, an escape route, but there was none. She was utterly, comprehensively defeated. She turned without another word and stalked into the bedroom. Julian stood in the living room, listening to the sounds of her angry, frantic packing. He looked around the vast, beautiful space. It felt tainted, desecrated. The chrome furniture she had ordered for the nursery now seemed like a monument to his own hubris. 10 minutes later, Sienna emerged, pulling a single suitcase. She had changed out of the expensive designer dress and was wearing simple jeans and a sweater. Her face was stripped of makeup, pale and pinched. She walked to the door, stopping for one last, parting shot. "You'll go crawling back to her, won't you?" she sneered. "But she'll never look at you the same way. You didn't just break her heart, Julian. You broke her faith in you. And you can't buy that back with all your money. You'll be just as alone as I am." She opened the door and slammed it behind her, the sound echoing the one he had made when he'd left Annalise. Julian stood alone in the center of the silent room, the truth of her final words washing over him. He was alone. He had torched his own life for a woman who was a monster and a lie that was a ghost. The rage began to subside, replaced by a profound and hollow ache. He pulled out his phone, his hands still shaking. He scrolled through his contacts, past the lawyers and the business partners, until he found her name, Annalise. His thumb hovered over the call button. What could he possibly say? "I'm sorry I was a fool. I was cruel and monstrous, but I know the truth now." The words felt pathetic, inadequate. They could never heal the wounds he had inflicted. He sank onto the sofa, the dossier still open on the table, the image of the stolen ultrasound staring up at him like a malevolent eye. He had won the battle with Sienna, but he knew with sickening certainty that he had already lost the war. Now came the reckoning. When Julian's name flashed on her phone, Annalise felt not a pang of anxiety, but a quiet resolve. At 8 months pregnant, her world had become smaller, yet more real. At her sister Chloe's insistence, she answered on speaker. "Annalise," he began, his voice broken. She lied. The ultrasound, the pregnancy, it was all a lie. I was a cruel, arrogant fool, and I am so sorry. She remained silent, letting his confession hang in the air. Please, he begged, his voice cracking. I'm downstairs. I need to see you. Annalise agreed, not for him, but for herself. She met him on the pavement, a stark contrast of two worlds. He stood beside his gleaming Bentley, looking diminished and lost. She, in a simple maternity dress, looked radiant and whole. He flinched when he truly saw her, the living truth he had so easily discarded. I don't want your apologies, Julian, she said, her voice firm, but not unkind. They are for you, not for me. They are to make you feel better about the wreckage you caused. Tears streamed down his face. What can I do? I'll do anything. I want to be a father to our son. This was never about money, she countered calmly. It was about trust. You didn't just have a lapse in judgment. You showed me who you are when you're afraid. You chose a convenient lie over faith in me, and you questioned our child. That can't be fixed. She took a final, steadying breath. Our son will know who his father is. He will have your name and your financial support. But there is no us anymore. I will not raise my child in a partnership built on guilt and obligation. I will do it on my own. Julian finally understood the true depth of his loss. It wasn't just his wife he had lost, but the man he could have been. He watched Annalise turn and walk back into the building without a second glance, a picture of serene strength. She was not angry or vengeful. She was free. He was left standing alone on the pavement with his billions, his Bentley, and his hollow, self-inflicted solitude. Annalise, meanwhile, stepped back into the light of the small apartment, her future entirely her own, a new beginning, waiting just beyond the horizon. And so Julian Croft, the man who had everything, was left with nothing that mattered. His story is a powerful cautionary tale about the corrosive nature of lies, but more than that, it's a story about the deceptive allure of our own desires. He wasn't just fooled by a clever mistress, he was a willing participant in his own deception because her lie fed his deepest insecurity. Annalise's journey from heartbreak to empowerment shows us the incredible resilience of the human spirit and the strength found in choosing one's own truth over a comfortable falsehood. What do you think was Julian's punishment fitting for his betrayal? Could you ever forgive someone for a breach of trust that deep? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story of drama, deception, and ultimate justice gripped you, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with someone who loves a powerful story, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more tales of love, loss, and the incredible twists of life. Thank you for listening.